Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 40th episode of the Cultured Pull List, the final episode in Season 1. And in this episode, we're going to be tackling the DC Comics Christmas centered story Batman Noel, released in 2011. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cultured Pull List, part of the Cultured Nerd Podcast Network. We are your hosts, Mike and Luke from Casual Experts, and Christmas is right around the corner.
Ooh,
So to celebrate that, we are gonna talk about probably the most Christmassy comic story that I know of, at least, because this is
mhm.
based off of it's very much inspired by Charles
Yeah.
Dickens' A Christmas Carol.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, this is also going to be our last episode of this season.
Yeah.
After this, we are going to take a couple weeks off, and then we'll be back on January 12th with first episode of season 2. So definitely stick around and keep your eyes open for that.
Mhm.
But yeah, let's get into Batman Noel, which was written and featuring art by Lee Bermejo. The colorist is Barbara Ciardo, and the letterer is Todd Klein. And this book was released on November 2011. I believe it was released all at once as like a one shot graphic novel. But all right, so the story opens, and like throughout this whole story, we do have this narration that is basically laying out the whole Christmas story or the whole Christmas Carol story, but it seems like it's kind of we don't really know who it is until the end, but it seems like it's from the perspective of kind of like a blue collar type guy, just an average person like telling somebody else the story in his own words. And this is like superimposed over all of the story that's actually happening and drawing parallels. So we open up with Batman running along the rooftops, and then we cut to this guy. I don't think he's ever technically named, but
Mm.
the narration very much draws parallels between him and Bob Cratchit from A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And we see him, he's being forced to basically do this job, this illegal job he doesn't really want to do, but he doesn't really have any other recourse, because, like Bob Cratchit, his son is sick and he needs to pay for his medicine and everything. Um, and so we see this note, and he's being told to leave this bag in at this boarded up toy store. And as he leaves the bag is taken away, and a package is put in its place that Cratchit's supposed to deliver. And just as he takes the package, Batman shows up and starts like wailing on him and yelling at him, intimidating him, like calling him scum, basically. And um, we learn through what Batman says that this guy, I'm just gonna call him Bob throughout the story, um, he is working for Joker, and Batman tries to get information out of him, but Bob really doesn't know anything, so Batman lets him go, but he puts a tracer on him, and he figures, since like he doesn't have the package, which was supposed to be filled with money that I guess he was supposed to deliver to Joker, um, since he doesn't have the money, Joker's gonna like track down Bob and go after him, and Batman's gonna try and get the Joker through Bob, basically as bait. So then Batman goes into the store to see if he can find what Bob delivered, but instead he just finds this note from Joker mocking him. Then we cut to Bob, who has hurriedly rushed home. We see his son, and his son is they're obviously pretty poor, pretty don't have a whole lot, and they don't have enough money for a Christmas tree. So his son makes kind of a makeshift Christmas tree and makes these ornaments, and he says that he wants to make like a Batman ornament. And Bob gets kind of mad and was like, things aren't, like his son says, well, isn't Batman a good guy? And Bob's like, well, things aren't always that black and white, like some
Mhm.
good people do bad things and vice versa, all that. So then we cut to Batman. He's in the Batcave, and what I found interesting is throughout this, the voiceover. like starts talking about Scrooge, and it's very obvious that they're drawing clear parallels to like from Batman to Scrooge.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of like throughout this, a lot of the stuff that Batman goes through is supposed to mirror what happens to Scrooge, like with the three ghosts and everything.
Yeah.
But we see that Batman has some sort of cough. It seems like he's really sick. Alfred tries to get him to rest for the night, but Batman's like obsessed with finding Joker. And through this, like this is a one shot, so it's not really part of any sort of necessarily part of the main, DC
Mhm.
Comics universe, but we do learn that this Batman, it seems like this takes place soon after Jason Todd was murdered by Joker.
Mhm.
We do get to we kind of see that Batman's tortured by this, and even for a second kind of has like a vision of seeing Jason again, and we kind of there is at one point like kind of a flashback showing them together. There really isn't any mention of Dick at all.
Yeah.
Um, so like I'm not sure if he just not mentioned, or in this like universe Jason was the only Robin, or maybe this is they're very vague. It's kind of like you kind of have to like
Yeah,
either
it's I think this is supposed to be Dick because the costume
okay
is more reminiscent of his Robin. That
that
would be my
is
guess, but it
that
doesn't actually say.
that is true. I do know that I think Jason did wear dicks at first.
Okay.
But like he did get his own. Yeah, it's kind of nebulous. It's not really clear, and
Right,
it doesn't
right.
really matter,
No.
like as far as the story goes.
Mhm.
But then Batman, the bat signal comes up, so Batman goes to the police station, and he finds Gordon, and Gordon gives him some information. Apparently, Catwoman's pulling some heist, but she knows some information on like Joker's whereabouts, and like this whole time, Batman's like hacking up along, and Gordon's like, "Are you okay, man?" And he's like, "Go fuck yourself, Gordon." Kind of like this is a very grouchy Batman. Um,
Right.
but and like that's kind of part of the story, kind of like drawing parallels to
Mm,
Scrooge, but also like Batman's. That's kind of how he's channeling like his grief and guilt with Jason. Um,
mhm.
so Batman goes to confront Selena, Catwoman. They end up kind of having like a little fight, and she kind of wants to flirt with him, but he's like, "Shut up and tell me where Joker is." Like I don't care about this. And she's like, "Well, I don't really know where Joker is. I just told you that to dry you out."
Mm,
And he like gets mad and basically calls her like a common criminal, and she gets mad at that, and they like have an actual fight. And as they're fighting, like she kind of says, you used to be different. You used to be basically not like, not as much of a dick, but also just kind of had more of a passion and like a drive for what you were doing. It wasn't like as like obsessive as it is
mm.
now. We kind of see a flashback. Yeah, he hears that flashback with Robin and Batman and like just them kind of doing their stuff together, fighting villains. And it's kind of funny. This Batmobile looks kind of like the Adam West one.
Yeah.
Even the suits are kind of reminiscent of the Adam West
Mhm.
um, show, this Batman
Mhm.
66 show. But Catwoman ends up running away on the rooftops. Batman follows her, but he ends up not being able. He kind of doesn't make it across one of the buildings. He grabs onto a gargoyle, but it cracks and he falls down. And as he falls and lands and gets injured, he's kind of having flashbacks to his parents being murdered. And this is I think this is kind of supposed to be like Catwoman's supposed to be kind of the ghost of Christmas past, and she's
Right.
kind of bringing up memories of his past with Robin and his parents and everything. And as he looks up,
He sees Superman, and Superman is kind of the supposed to be the like the ghost of Christmas present, the jolly Father Christmas type character.
right,
And yeah, once again he talks about how he dresses Batman's cough because you can like X-ray into his lungs. He says, it's not very good. And then
yeah, I think he even
Batman,
says like he has pneumonia. I think,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then once again, Batman's like, "Go fuck yourself." And then
yeah,
Superman's just kind of like takes him around the city, showing him again. We don't know his name, but it's Bob and his son, showing them and how like again the son likes Batman, but the father doesn't, and how like they're not necessarily bad people, but they're just in a bad circumstance. And
right,
then as they're flying, they're talking about just just like being good people, and he sort of just like has visions of all just like regular people, and then they fly over to Jim Gordon, and he's talking to a cop. I don't believe the cop is named, but he's talking to a cop about Batman and how like um yeah, Batman's like, so the cop's like, "Is Batman like a necessary evil?" And he's like, "Not necessarily, but like he's kind of like dark and he like crosses the line and sometimes the line doesn't even exist and you just have to kind of there's this sort of nebulous relationship between the two." And then they finally that ends Superman's visit, and right as he's about to get into the car, it explodes, and he's dragged off by a third figure, um, to which turns out to be the Joker, and they go to um, Gotham Cemetery, where Joker has this big hole, and I'm not entirely sure if this is literally happening or it's just a hallucination, but
Right.
he basically throws him into the hole, and he kind of he saw this nightmare version of Gotham in the future. It's being looted, and it's kind of like in the Frank Miller books, how there's like a whole like a cult of Batman people,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's kind of what's happening here, but this is like worse, and they're basically quoting Batman directly as they're
Y-
like killing people.
yeah, I think he's seeing like Gotham after he dies.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
and they're quoting him directly as they're
Hmm.
killing people, things he said earlier in the book.
Right.
And then there's like a Joker gang too, and it's just like just a massacre happening. And then I'm not sure what this court scene is, but over
I'm pretty
on
sure it's Jim being like prosecuted for helping Batman for like being in league with Batman basically.
okay, yeah, 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 yeah,
And he's like
okay,
sent to prison for like 30 years.
yeah, exactly. And then over on this side, they're basically auctioning off all of his stuff, all of his stuff at Wayne Manor. Um, and then Batman pulls himself out of the grave, similar to that one Spider-Man comic. Oh, it's probably just a
Oh,
coincidence.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and then there's a knock at the door of Bob and his son. Turns out to be the Joker, and they talk about he talks about playing Clue, and then he's like he's gonna kill him with a wrench. It's like in Clue.
Yeah.
Um,
In the kitchen. No.
yeah,
Right.
exactly in the kitchen with the wrench. And then right as he's about to shoot Bob, Batman shows up, and then they get into a fight, and but then Bob's about to shoot the Joker, but then Batman's like, "No, don't do it because you're gonna cross the line and you're gonna become bad." And so they arrest the Joker, and then there's a scene with Jim Gordon looking off, and Batman runs away, and then he wakes up in the cave, sort of implying that it was all a dream, but who's to say? Um, and basically he wakes up on Christmas morning, and then he we kind of see this in a lot of different Batman media, but he kind of uses his wealth as Bruce Wayne to help people as well.
Hmm.
And then it kind of closes on
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of a Christmas Carol
yeah,
too,
yes, yes, of
because
course.
like he gives like he gives Bob and his son a bunch of stuff, and he even like uh gives Bob a job at Wayne Enterprises.
Hmm, hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it closes out with Jim at the police station celebrating Christmas. And oh no, it doesn't. There's more. Um, it turns out that Bob was telling this story to his son about in the story he was talking about Scrooge, but he was literally just talking about Batman.
Hmm.
And then his son is wearing a cape, and that is actually the end.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so Batman
Yeah,
Noel. I had been meaning to read this for a long time, and it's kind of never
mhm,
got around to it. So glad finally read
yeah.
it. But yeah, what do you think?
I actually really enjoyed it. I was
Yeah.
not expecting. I don't think I've heard of this, but I was not
Oh,
expecting
okay.
it to be just a Christmas Carol with Batman.
Hmm.
But even though it's just a Christmas Carol with Batman, like there's a way you could have done that that would have been really lazy, but like I feel like
Yeah.
they did a really good job with this one.
Yeah, because it's not like a total one to one. Like
Right.
even the narration doesn't necessarily 100% match what's going on, which I kind of expected at first. It's more
Mhm,
just implying
mhm,
like the vague general like story, the general idea. I didn't know it was like a Christmas Carol thing until like we started to read it. Like I saw like a blurb
mhm,
about it. I'm pretty sure Batman Damned is supposed to. I that one's written by Lee Bermejo as well. I don't know if it's I think it might be like the same continuity, but I'm
Okay.
not sure. That was like the infamous one that like showed Bruce Wayne's penis when he's showering or
Mm,
something. But yeah, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was like a fun one shot. It was a pretty easy read,
mhm.
and I liked. There's a lot of stuff I liked. I liked I really like the art style. I really like Lee
Yeah.
Bermejo's art. It's very like visceral and feels really real, but kind of gritty.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I really like the detail he puts in the suits. Like I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of like DC, and comic book art, like it just kind of the costume, like you get the general idea. There might be some details, but this almost felt like he was drawing like concept art for like a movie or something. Like
Mm,
it felt
yeah.
like a real costume. I
Mhm.
thought that was really cool, and I liked what he did with Batman too. I feel like there's a lot of I don't know. I don't feel like there's a lot of Batman like adaptations of Batman I've seen where he's just kind of like really just kind of dark and like really on the edge of like,
Mhm.
almost just, not necessarily like killing, but I kind of the idea where he doesn't really have the rule, the no killing rule as some sort of like, self-righteous type thing. It's more like he knows he kind of part of him kind of wants to kill criminals, and he has to
Mhm.
like make sure that he doesn't cross that line. And I
Right.
feel like that version of Batman, like I feel like there's a lot of like newer versions are more like kind of perfect, almost self-righteous versions of Batman that are,
Mm.
I kind of like seeing a more like jaded Batman, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, for sure.
especially when that version kind of gets room to grow, like in
Mm.
this, because it kind of showed like he was jaded, but a lot of that was, him dealing with his grief and everything. And I think there's kind of some of that in the newest, like the Batman, Matt Reeves Batman too.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was a fun book. Glad we
Yeah.
read it, and nice little Christmas story. And before we tie things up in a bow for the
Yeah.
season, let's talk about our cultured picks. What do you have for this week?
This week I picked a whole mini series. It's only 2 issues, but it's
Mm,
Nightwing and Oracle Convergence. It was written by Gail Simone, and I was kind of surprised that this is the only Nightwing thing she's ever written because
mm,
it's honestly one of my favorites. It's because I mean it's really just a tie-in to a bigger event, Convergence, but it's
right.
these 2 issues is for those of you unaware of it with Convergence, it's kind of like they took in the New 52 continuity, they took versions of characters from before the New 52 and they kind of brought them back into this sort of like a almost like Secret Wars in a way where they have all these different worlds and they're like colliding into each other.
Mm,
And so there's a lot of different miniseries that tied into that event, and this was one of them. But I just really like the way that this story portrays Nightwing and Oracle. It's one of my favorite depictions of the two, and I'm really impressed with the way that
that's cool.
she was able to do it. And if you're wondering why Hawkman's there, because
Yeah.
yeah, so it's yeah, they have Nightwing. So they have like different versions of pre New 52 characters, and they're fighting other versions of pre New 52 characters. So it was
Oh, I see.
pre Flashpoint Nightwing and Oracle versus pre Flashpoint Hawkman and Hawkgirl. That's what the story is.
Okay.
But I just like it because I really
Interesting.
like the way that the characters are depicted.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like if yeah, I was seeing like some of the art, like that suit looks like an older Nightwing
Mhm.
suit.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
not the new 52 one. That's
Yeah.
cool. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Hmm. When did that come out again?
20 I
Well, was
want to say
that
2014.
okay?
Yeah,
Interesting.
because it was before Rebirth, but after the New 52. So
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah. So my picks, I actually have a few picks because like it's the end of the season and end of the year. I want to
Mhm.
get them all out. But the first one is the Aquaman and Lost Kingdom special. It's basically just like a prequel to the movie.
Mhm.
And I honestly found like there's three main stories in this. There's one that focuses on Arthur, one that focuses on Orm, and one that focuses on Black Manta.
Mhm.
I thought the Aquaman one was kind of interesting because like he actually like, teams up with Wonder Woman and Flash,
Mhm.
and that was kind of cool to see. Like kind of like got our last looks at them in the
Mhm.
movies, like the Gal Gadot's and Ezra Miller's versions of the character, but kind of seeing them in the comic was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But they're like the whole thing. He's like kind of planning his wedding and everything, and at the very end, Mira reveals she's pregnant. So I think it takes place like maybe like 9 months to a year before the movie.
Mhm.
But the Black Manta one's kind of interesting. Like he's basically sent on like all these trials by his dad. Like his dad left him a bunch of trials to like prove himself as like Black
Mhm.
Manta. But I think the most interesting one was the Orm one because we get to see Orm in like this prison, like this desert prison.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is how his like because throughout the book, I mean throughout the story, you kind of hear his internal dialogue, and throughout it, it changes from him being like, I'm gonna get out of here, like, I'm the rightful king, I've been wrongly thrown in here, and by the end he's like, I deserve to be in here, like to atone for like all the people I hurt and everything. It's kind of
Mhm.
interesting how like he kind of gets broken down because he keeps trying to escape, but each time he keeps getting foiled, and by the end he's like, I'm never gonna get out of here, like I'm like I had this coming to me. It's kind of interesting,
Mm.
and it kind of like informs where like Orm is, when the movie picks up, which is kind of
Yeah.
I found that the most interesting. But yeah, I have another thing. It's more of a like crossover like event thing that's going on with like Spider-Man. It's called Gang
Mhm.
War.
Yeah.
So there's like First Strike, and then it goes throughout his stories, his books, and it also there's also a few other titles like Luke Cage and
Mhm.
Shang-Chi's a part of it too. But what's really been interesting, like this is still part of Zeb Wells' run with Spider-Man. So here's the Daredevil. It's Elektra Daredevil. But what's
Mhm.
kind of cool with this is like there's just a bunch of like pretty much all the gang lords in New York are like warring now because Tombstone was taken out of the picture, pretty
Mm.
much presumed dead, and so there's kind of like a power vacuum, and like Spider-Man's trying to stop them, but to stop them he like assembles like a kind of a little team of She-Hulk, Miles Morales, and Elektra, Daredevil, and Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, and it's kind of a very like street level thing, which I feel like in a lot of ways, like some of Marvel's best stuff is street level, like
Mhm.
vigilante more type stuff, like with Spider-Man, Daredevil, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And this is almost kind of a crime story as
Mm.
well. Like, I mean, obviously, because it's a bunch of crime lords and stuff. So I think that's like really cool direction to go. I feel like, especially Spider-Man hasn't really done that in the last few
Mhm.
years. So it's a pretty interesting arc so far. I look
Yeah.
forward to reading more, but last one I had, I mostly just wanted to bring this up because there's a couple cool things in this. Joshua Williamson's like newest Superman run has been pretty interesting. I've talked
Mhm.
about some of the issues before in our culture pull list segments, but what I thought was fun about this was like at the end of last issue, Superman was poisoned by kryptonite, so to kind of avoid further poisoning, like he ends up using this like repurposing this old Lex Luthor armor into like
Mhm.
Superman armor, and it's like to fight the main bad guy, and I thought that was kind of cool. And then at the very end, he like through a bunch of different events, he ends up getting transported to like the Wild West, and like
Oh.
he ends up like it's not clear what's happening yet because there's like this Wild West like ghost lady that's been going around like kind of haunting people in
Mm.
this series so far, and somehow that's like his being transported to the Wild West is like part of that, but like the last panel it's just him in like almost like a Clint Eastwood get up, and it's like him confronting some like desperado type. So it's very yeah. I'm really not sure what they're gonna do with this, but it's kind of a fun um, thing to shake things up. I think with the Superman
Yeah.
story and character and everything. But yeah, that is it. Kind of a shorter episode, but wrapping
Mhm.
things up for the year. We will
Yeah.
see you in season 2 next year. Hope you all have a great
Mhm.
holiday.
Yeah.
This has been TCN Presents The Cultured Pull List. If you would like to support us on Patreon to help us bring you more content, check us out at patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show specific tier if you would like to support our shows. I have been your host, Michael Malillo. My co-host has been Luke S. Our logo was designed by Jose Navarro, and our intro was designed by me. Thank you so much for joining us. Please like and subscribe, that really helps a lot. Scan the QR code on the bottom left to check out The Cultured Nerd on social media. And scan the QR code on the bottom right to check out me and Luke's other brand, Casual Experts, on social media, YouTube, and our other podcast. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.